Cracking games, Gromit.
Oh, there's some more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
We've forgotten installers.
US Gold presents
Mr. Opportunities.
Oh, there's some more coming up on this week's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Retro, and we're joined this week by friend of the show, contributor to the show, man about podcasts, and the world's #1 collector of Oh Mummy. It's Paul, aka Pajako6502. Hello, Paul.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. There's so much we could talk about with you, ranging from Oh Mummy to that collection just over your right shoulder of tiny cassette tapes that I can see there. Yeah. Tell us about the Oh Mummy fascination.
So this started as a joke, actually. I was watching, it was This Week in Retro, and I think you had, I'm rubbish with names and stuff, but it was Ross of the Robots on.
Oh, yes.
And
his name's Ross.
Ross, yeah, collecting like rubbish things. No, it was I was trying to remember his surname, but I was trying to collect like rubbish things, and I just thought, hey, I can collect rubbish things. And I'd always have this kind of fascination with Oh Mummy, so I thought, you know what? What would be really funny is if I just got like the Spectrum version and the Amstrad version, and I can say, look, I've got the complete set of Oh Mummy, I've got both. And then I went down a bit of a rabbit hole and found that not only is that not the only two versions, but there are hundreds of variants. Well, not hundreds, but there's a lot of variants. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 there. Some Spanish Amstrad ones, and now there's a German one, there's a French one, there's the Tate and Einstein one. It just turned into one of these things. It's it's like, it's supposed to be a joke, and now I'm trying to get them all. But it's not like, I'm going to go to my grave having never collected them all and be like, damn you, Oh Mummy. It's just like, if they come up,
use this as an opportunity, Paul. Do you want to put out an appeal? Is there a specific version of Oh Mummy you're trying to track down?
You know what? I let the Tate and Einstein version that came on disc slip through my fingers about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago on eBay, because I just thought, I'm not paying that. It went for about £50. And I've never seen another one since. So, like Tate and Einstein, some weird Spanish MSX variant, if you've got them, please send them. I'm desperate. I'm not. But yeah, if anyone's looking to off them, then I would definitely be your man.
Fantastic. Well, this week I have been editing the Space Race episode. So those of you who follow the channel will have seen Richard 3D printed an arcade last year, and that was Computer Space, the wonderful, originally a fiberglass arcade, which is why it lent itself to 3D printing quite well. And Richard has followed that up, and I can tell you this now because the episode will have been released by the time this goes out, with Atari's second big game. I think it was second because you had Computer Space was Nutty and Associates, Pong was Atari. You did have variants of Pong, like 2-player Pong. And then Space Race was the next sort of big game to come out from Atari. And Richard's done it again, 3D printed this huge arcade using slightly different techniques from lessons learned in the Computer Space project. So look out for that. It's a 2-part series. So please enjoy that when you see it. And also, as soon as that's out the way, we're working really hard on the whole rebranding project. Did I talk about this last week? I think I did. The Retro Collective, as we call ourselves.
Yeah, memorable.
Is going to be, memorable. Struggle to remember it there. Is going to be what the online content output is with the cave remaining as the museum name and the arcade archive and all that. So you'll be seeing lots of that. And as part of that project, we'll be looking to refurbish a new part of the mill, and we're doing a little fundraiser, which involves a digital package of really cool stuff. And lots of people have come forward, people like Pixel Addict, people like Bitmap Books, people like Bitmap Bureau behind the game Xenocrisis, and contributed things for me to put into this digital package to sell you to raise money for the next part of this mill project. So look out for that in the coming weeks because it's a really cool package. So that's what I've been up to. I've done my little bit of self-promo there, Dave. Have you got anything to promote?
No, I don't have anything to promote, really, but I've been busy this week with family stuff. Elderly parents is time-consuming, unfortunately. But something nice happened to me. You remember that RGB30 I talked about, the little handheld device?
Oh, yeah.
The 1-1 screen, the nice square screen that's ideal for retro. Well, I wanted this little handle thing you slip it into for your hands to go into this grip. And I saw it on eBay and said to the guy, look, black or white, I can't decide. Just print off whichever one is easier for you. So it's a 3D printed handle for it. And the guy sent me both. So if you're looking for one of those, if I've convinced you to get an RGB 30, then go to eBay. And if you want the handle for it, C.Threadgold is the seller. What a nice chap. Sent me two for no reason. He didn't, no idea who I was or anything. Just I'm not an influencer.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not. Oh no, I don't want to be an influencer. But if you want the handle for it, there's a nice guy on eBay. Send him your business. £12.75 it cost me, including postage.
That's not bad.
Yeah, not bad at all. It's a lovely wee device.
Paul, I introduced you, but I didn't ask you if you've been up to anything retro-related this week. What have you been doing?
A little bit. I'm in the middle of, I'm in the middle of 1,000 projects, and I always am. But I've been ripping. A friend of mine gave me like hundreds and hundreds of 3.5-inch floppy disks. So I've been fiddling with my grease weasel. Trying to get those ripped. And now I've actually, some of them won't copy. So I've resorted to an old PC a friend of mine gave me, old E-Machines Pentium that's now got a copy of Spin Right. So I've been using that to rip. There's nothing special on there. He just wants to get rid of the discs. And I said, as part of the process of getting rid of them, I would rip them for him. And then, I met up with Robo John 2084 for coffee and a bit of lunch on Saturday.
Nice.
So yeah, that's good.
Pajaco is my idol as far as Amigo's retro gaming is concerned. They do a Game of the Week style podcast, and they do it for the Amiga, which is called Everything Amiga, and they also do the Atari ST in a rotation, as well as the ZX Spectrum, and sometimes the Atari 8-bit and other things as well. Pajaco, what have I forgotten? The Coco, the wonderful Coco. Yep. And every single episode, almost without fail, there is a review of the game by Pajaco, because you always find time to play the game. And it's an inspiration when I think about Chrissy's Play More in 24. It's you I think about saying to yourself, you always find the time to play it and push yourself to do these things rather than just talk about it. And I want to be more like you in 2025 and play these games. DOS Game Club is one I want to do as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like, I work from home. Obviously, I have for like the last 5 years or so. So I don't generally get out much. So the whole kind of podcast, all that kind of thing. No, it's kind of my as sad as it sounds, my social life, and I quite enjoy it because I don't have to put any makeup on and look nice. So, but one of the things with retro gaming and having every game known to mankind at your fingertips is that often you're like, what do I play? You've got 1,000 games. So actually they kind of do me a favor sometimes by going, hey, why don't we play this week? And I'm like, great, that's the one I'm going to play, and I'm going to play and try to be objective about it. Try not to look through rose-tinted glasses, although we're playing Adam's Family on the Amiga this week.
That was one of Boat's favourites.
Where's the backgrounds?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great game. It's really, really good. It's tough as nails, but it's a great game. So,
does he still? I guess we'll find out on the next episode. But if he still thinks that's the best Amiga platformer,
I think he probably does. Yes. We've been talking about it on Discord, and he was giving hints and tips on how to get through the game. It's very generous with extra lives, and you need them. Yeah.
Shall we get right into it then?
Let's get into it.
Listeners will probably have picked up by now that I love a big box game. Viewers can't help it because I'm sitting in front of walls full of them. I've always talked about the difference between a big box game back in the early 90s or the end of the 80s, where the game starts when you touch the box, versus these days where the game starts when you launch it.
I do always admire your selection of big box games behind you, Dave, but I've just got to point out, after months of you sitting in front of crates and then tidying up your crates, somehow you've managed to get a single orange crate on the floor behind you, and it's really bugging me now I've spotted it.
That orange crate is in here to pick up the things in here that shouldn't be in here.
Okay.
And then take them out and add them to the pile of crates I need to sort through into the grey crates that I bought last year.
Okay.
There's a method to my madness.
Okay, carry on.
Back in the 80s, that would be me in the shop sifting through cassette tapes for my Amstrad CPC and trying to work out from the blurb and the screenshots if this game is going to be the game that blows me away. And of course, most of them didn't. But enough of them had enough enjoyment that I kept going back. by the end of the 80s and the early 90s, I was reading ST format, trying to work out which games I should get in the barras on pirate discs. And then in the barras, looking through the lists of games, trying to work out what sounded good just from the name alone.
What's the barras?
The barras is Europe's largest indoor market.
Oh, okay.
It's a collection of stalls in the centre of Glasgow, and there was loads and loads of pirate software stalls there. So you would go in and you would be able to get any pirate games very quickly. We'd have runners who would run to a secret location where they copied the disc and then come back with the discs in case the police raided them. But yeah, that's where we used to go for pirate games. Used to get the train in. Me and a couple of pals would go and we would get maybe 5 or 6 discs each and then come home and copy each other's and end up with loads and loads of games. And that's why I ended up with too many ST games to play. And that's how I thought things were. We had that period where you got the box, and then we had the period after where you didn't get the box, or if you did, it didn't matter because the game started when you got the intro. And the box, we had the manual, the feelies, the browsies, and then like a door slamming shut, we had Steam or GOG or Epic or whatever launcher it is now, and the game starts after it's installed when it pops up on your screen. And I'm wrong, of course. And thanks to Good Punk 2, I've been re-educated on the lost art of installers, the middle place that we had between big box games and modern Steam stuff. But before we get into that, I want to mention a slightly related thing, and that's crack throws. Because for my ST, and I know for Amiga and Commodore 64 and others too, when you got a pirated game, which I think most of us had most of our games as pirates, there would nearly always be a short demo at the start of it. Now, on the ST, this would usually be some good music, either original music or stolen from a game, and then a piece of original computer art. Neil, are you a fan of crack throws?
Yeah, yes, a piece of computer art and some scrolling text as well.
Oh, yeah. Greets and who's a lamer?
Who's a lamer? Yeah, I'm a fan. And when I saw on the show notes you'd be talking about this, I accidentally fell down a YouTube rabbit hole of listening to Cracktros, which put me right back in my teenage bedroom. And so with Duncan's help here, sorry to create work for you, Duncan, here is a little medley of Cracktros, which I'm afraid is from my Amiga days mainly because I didn't own a C64 or an ST, so I don't have that nostalgic hit from back in the day from listening to those ones as much as I can appreciate them. So here is a Cracktro medley. So there we go, some tunes from my past, and those included the Shadow of the Beast Cracktro on the Amiga. There was a tune there by a group called Prodigy from 1991, not that Prodigy, it was the cracking group Prodigy. The Company, there with their Barbarian 2 Cracktro on the Amiga. And then the last one, we're jumping forward a decade or so, that was not a Cracktro, but a Keygen tune for some PC software. I think that was Sony Vegas specifically, but you would have heard that on other Keygens. Do we count Keygens as in the same category?
I guess so, yeah, same idea. Yeah. My favourite one in the PC is the one for Razer 1911's version of Alpha Centauri, the Shupu Cracktro for that. The tune is amazing on it.
There was a period where a lot of the PC keygens were using old chip tunes from old Cracktros as well, which was a really nice nostalgic hit. You know, in case you were feeling a bit guilty about pirating, you could get a warm, fuzzy feeling, make yourself feel better.
I mean, funny enough, I listen to chip tunes because I'm weird. But no, sometimes if you're looking on YouTube for that kind of music, sometimes they're called keygen music because the people putting them up there only ever knew them from keygen stuff. So
I imagine there's a lot of modern music creators who started out with torrented or pirated music creation software and would have been exposed to those keygens, you know, regardless if they had a history in vintage computers or gaming. Yeah,
exactly. And I was just saying, you know, one of the other things I found when I've got my off-site backups of some ROMs, that some of those, if you had cracked ROMs that were loaded from floppy disk loaders, some of those I found have got like little Cracktros in them as well, which is quite amazing, really, when you think about it. But they're everywhere.
I like the caveat of off-site backups of ROMs. Is that just to put off anyone that's thinking of swatting you there, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was one of the most prolific off-site backup people in Europe. Unofficial, because obviously if the people knew about it, then there was a chance it could get lost. So the companies were deliberately not told.
Yeah. Minimise the risk. After that little diversion, which had no relation to the submitted story, really, but I enjoyed it. Let's get to the point of this segment, and it's a video from Good Punk called "The Lost Art of Fancy PC Game Installers."
Can we do like a little jingle for that?
Ooh.
Oh, come on, that's rubbish. Oh, fancy. Should be like that.
You've got a clip that says "Oh, fancy," haven't you?
Have I?
Oh, fancy.
No, I haven't got any of those today. Not on my soundboard, sorry.
Ooh. It's about how we had, for a period in the mid-90s to the early 00s, these fancy installers. Not just the typical installer that's in DOS with a standard character font, that type of thing. These were fancy with music and graphics and speech, and in some cases, little games put in them as well.
Anything more than a grey dialogue box and a blue progress bar is frivolous.
These frivolous Command and Conquer Red Alert with speech, trying to make you feel part of the game before the game had started, phrasing the install steps in different words to try and make you sound as if you're in the game already. The video talks about it and then showcases some interesting examples of it. Nox, Red Alert, Lands of Lore, Guardians of Dexterity, Guardians of Dexterity, and Worms United. So going a bit deeper, I thought I'd explain why these started and why they stopped. We, of course, started with games on disc or tape when we launched the game. Usually they had a loading screen, and that was your lot, although there are ocean loaders on the C64 for a bit more. But relative to the size of the game, the loading screen was actually relatively quite big, and it was usually a full-on graphic rather than what we see in the game, which was generated by the program on the go. When it came to games on disc, the 16-bit era in particular, things got tight. And once we moved on to the DOS era, or if you're an Amiga fan, once everybody else moved on and you were left pretending it was okay, we had games on several discs that needed installed. And you just couldn't waste a few megabytes with a fancy installer when you were already probably too many disks. And the more disks you had, the more returns you had to do, the more expense and duplication you had to do. And then all of a sudden, it's when it started with, I think, with CDs. Initially, CDs were mostly not full. So that left plenty of room for this. And installing did take a while. So why not give the player to look at? And funnily enough, that seems to be exactly the same point that big box games started giving up. We started having big box games. We're talking about this on Discord this week. The CD jewel case inside the big box game contained everything, and the big box was just a bit of useless packaging. And that's when these fancy installers started. So what would happen is you would put it in and you would get some of the lore from the game. You would get some interesting things about it. You get some music, and it would absorb you from that point when you started installing rather than from when you launched the game. Now, of course, it stopped partially when we had, was it Install Shield? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
The Microsoft installer thing The
I
Windows
don't think it was
installer.
Microsoft. But
No,
it was
the Windows installer thing that everybody used. And of course, that meant you had less there. They still had graphics coming up in infographics type thing. And then, of course, once we had Steam, it stopped entirely. Had you forgotten about them, Neil?
I guess I had forgotten about them because installing was never a sort of a sexy process. I was always distracted doing something else, just listening to the chuntering of the disc or the CD spinning, and then when it stopped, I knew to spin round and put the next one in. So I was having a really good think about fancy installers, and I can't think of any, Dave. None come back to me other than installing Windows 95 and all the promises that it makes you when you're installing the operating system.
I enjoyed that. They really valued us as customers then, didn't they?
But games-wise, no, nothing other than a few fancy, screenshots of the game that you're about to play and just watching the progress bar. So I don't specifically remember this Command and Conquer one you're talking about. So I'm going to have to go and, I'll watch the video. I'm not going to go to the lengths of installing Command and Conquer to watch it. So I'll watch the video.
Paul, what about you? Do you remember these?
I'd utterly forgotten them. And then, funnily enough, I posted a story from the Metro about Command and Conquer being 30 years old. And then someone in that comment said, oh, and the installer for that was great. And then suddenly this little bit of my brain flashed in. I was like, oh, wow, yeah. And then I went and looked it up and utterly forgotten about it. But it was just
so had I. Yeah.
Full immersion from the minute it starts. Like you're installing this controller to control your armies and you're in. And it was, amazing. So, yeah.
Well, go and give the video a watch, and there is an update to it. He's got a bonus video with more installer stuff on it. And maybe if you if you think about playing one of these games in the future, think about how the installer makes you feel. We are sponsored this week by PCBWay. PCBWay are a manufacturing company that has recently celebrated their 10-year anniversary, and they are able to make not just PCBs, not just printed circuit boards, but they can also assemble them for you, and they can do CNC milling, they can do 3D printing, they can do other things, Neil, as well, that I've forgotten.
They have a 24-hour production lead time, asterisk. Team supported by over 90 professional and technical people, and a 99% on-time shipping service at PCBWay.com. Just to name a few things that I've thought of off the top of my head there, Dave.
The thing that we always talk about that we like is the shared project place. That's unique. You can go and see all sorts of projects from other people and print something off, which is even if you want to get into doing a PCB, you can pick something really small and simple, something fun to do, and do your first PCB there. Thank you for sponsoring us, PCBWay.com.
Outrun continues to fascinate developers and gamers alike. The 1986 racer crammed not one, but two Motorola 68000 CPUs clocked in at 12.5 megahertz. It had two sound chips, it had custom graphics hardware to create those fast-moving sprites, and of course the way it splits the road between levels. Sorry, I just bashed the microphone there. Hopefully it didn't cause any problems. Notable in the game also was that it allowed over 12,000 colours on screen at once, which was best seen with those fading sunsets and the way that the colour changed between stages. The challenge of porting a game loaded with so much technology that operators were advised to charge double the normal credit rate to cover the cost has always been a very tough one, at least when it comes to porting it to systems of the same period. And this has come up before on the show, of course. We've talked about various developers who have tried to port Outrun. We've had things like the Cannonball engine, the Reassembler project, which was making waves last year. And that was based on an Amiga 1200 and a Terrible Fire with a 68030 in it. So quite a powerful Amiga. But back in the day, the quality of home ports really did vary wildly. We had ports to things like the PC Engine and the Mega Drive, which did an okay job. We had the Atari ST and the Amiga, which did a pretty atrocious job, and had an intro scene so bad that it's pretty much become a joke to retro gamers in the modern day. And I wonder, just to create a bit more work for you, Duncan, if you could drop a little clip in of that intro from the bit where it says US Gold Presents and the chaos that follows, please. Take it away, Duncan.
US Gold Present from Sega.
I think if I heard that attract sound in an arcade, I would be running for my life to get out of there. Anyway, the latest person to take on the challenge of porting Outrun to the Amiga is Thomas Jensen and his team. The goal is to complete it for October of this year, and it is aiming to run on a stock Amiga 1200 system. Now, I say the latest person, but Thomas did talk about how he was working on this in his spare time in February last year in an interview to Retro 32. Previously in 2021, he talks about it on the English Amiga board, about it being a project he'd like to start. But there's a new video from Bastich. Is it Bastich or Bastic? How do you pronounce that? Bastic B64K and Judge Drock. And in the video, Drock interviews Thomas and he talks about his choices. And we do actually get to see some very advanced work in progress videos. It really does show that the project has come along an impressive way. And he explains that he's really close to finishing the project and he's set a target of October this year. The reason being that will coincide with the 40th birthday of the Amiga. So there'll be the big Amiga 40 party. I think that's in Germany, isn't it? Albeit the 40th birthday of an Amiga computer that won't be able to run it because this is targeting AGA machines. And that's not a gripe from me. I think it's fine to aim for a stock 1200. Even if Outrun would have felt like old hat to cutting-edge gamers in 1992 when the system came out, it is fun to see what the hardware was capable of. It's generally accepted that a stock OCS or ECS Amiga will never achieve an arcade-perfect port of Outrun, but that does lead me on to another question, which we might like to discuss, which is, do we expect too much of projects such as this? Now that we're used to firing up emulators with actual arcade ROMs of games, are we less forgiving of ports that strip the game back to what they would have been if we'd run them on these systems that we originally owned? Have we become port snobs? Would we give it fair credit if we attempted Outrun on a stock Amiga 500 or Atari ST with all the concessions that would have to be made for it today, even if it was done well? Are we really going to let the Outrun on the Amiga 500 and Atari ST story conclude with the US Gold version? Dave?
So my understanding is the Amiga version of Outrun is just a port of the ST version, without the use of any of Amiga's custom chips apart from Paula for the sound, because the sound is different.
So no blitter.
No blitter. So it means it runs an ST game on slower hardware. So it's quite mediocre. I don't think it's quite as bad as Amiga fans say it is, but it really is mediocre. It is very deflating, particularly if you see it compared to the arcade. On the other hand, the same game in the ST was okay as far as I was concerned when it came with my power pack. It was okay, again, slightly better than mediocre, but not very good. The Amiga version has the different music, but even that doesn't sound right. Sounds weird, the Amiga music. It's important to remember, though, that this came out in 1988. And the Amiga had a very small user base back then in the UK, certainly, which is where this came from. And the ST had a bigger user base, but even then, it was mostly still 8-bit in the UK.
It's easy to say the Amiga should have done better with the hindsight of things like the Lotus series and games that came later. But you're right, in 88, what was the yardstick for racing games on the Amiga? What was
I know, there wasn't a lot around. On top of that, though, Lotus was made for the Amiga. Lotus was saying, what can the Amiga do for a racing game? Whereas Outrun was, well, here's the game, what can your Amiga do with it? It's long overdue that a new version is made that plays well on the ST or the Amiga. And of course, the ST is ahead of things with a 2019 STE version, which is actually really good. It uses more accurate sprites from the arcade game, as well as using the blitter and better colours, so it's a much better game. And in some ways, I'm sad that this Amiga version is targeting the 1200. Outrun's a 1986 game. The 1200 is a 1992 machine. I'd like to see just how close to the arcade someone could push the original Amiga hardware. And to go back to Neil's question to me about being port snobs, I think there is something in that. I think what we want to see, though, is we want to see the machine do its best. And clearly, not even the ST version was the machine doing its best. And the Amiga version was terrible because of the hardware that was completely unused. So even if someone did take this and they used an Amiga 500, the OCS, to do it, and they did the best Outrun they could with it, which would fall far short of this version of Outrun, because this version of Outrun is, to me, it looks really like the arcade. If the Amiga 500 version fell short of that by some way, I'm okay with that, because that's the best it can do. And I think the issue isn't that the game is terrible. I think the issue is the game is terrible, and it could have been and should have been much better. So there, yeah. Quite impressed with it so far, though. It looks great.
Does look good. Paul, are you an Outrun fan?
Yeah, I mean, it's not up there, but it's certainly one I'll always play in an arcade. You know, and I bought it on the Specky when it came out, which is not bad for the machine. But yeah, I the Amiga one, I think I agree with Dave. It's like, it should have been better. And kind of going back to, you know, the port snob thing, I think I'm kind of the opinion is like, what could it be? What could have been done? Like, if you could go back with a time machine and say, this is the game you're going to get, even if it's not arcade perfect, as long as it's fun and it's playable, that's really all that matters. And it looks like Outrun. You know, you can look at that game and go, that's Outrun. So.
Did you buy the full price version of it on the Spectrum back in the day?
Yeah, it had with the audio cassette, and I would play the audio cassette while I was playing it on the Specky. You know, my bedroom with a little, I think, might have had a colour telly, possibly black and white, but
well, it wouldn't have made much difference, would it? On
no, not really.
Version of the game. I spent, I think it was $9.99 on the Amstrad CPC version. And it came with this separate audio cassette. And I think that's the most memorable thing about it. I can't remember actually sitting and playing the game. I can't remember what it was like on my CPC, but I remember dragging my dad's stereo out and putting it next to the CPC so I could play that music while playing the game.
Yeah. The Amstrad CPC version of Outrun is turn-based strategy.
Well, there are certainly turns in it, Dave.
Funny enough, it was one of those things that I was inspired to go back and buy again.
Oh, there it is. There's the full price US gold version, published version.
I think,
but a completely different developer than the 16-bit versions.
Yeah, it says this side program, other side original soundtrack only. And then 48K.
That's the one I've got, Dave. Yeah.
But too cheap to put labels on both sides, so unless they fell off.
I don't believe this.
Dave, so for those on audio, Paul was holding up the Spectrum full price.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Dave was holding up the Atari ST, which is a cardboard box with a disc. No audio tape in there.
No audio tape. But you had the wonderful chip tune on the Atari ST.
Could have done with a nice like poster of the Roots. That would have been quite nice.
Yeah, some kind of Americana poster.
Yeah, and not fake screenshots on the back of the box.
Screenshots from the Atari ST version. There you go.
Yeah.
So a petition then to rename the racing genre to turn-based gaming.
Yeah.
That's what we should start. Did Oh Mummy get an Amiga port, Paul?
No, not that I'm aware of. There are a couple of homebrews, though. There's an Intellivision and a Mega Drive port in recent time.
Okay.
Is that announced? Is that as a travesty that needs addressed? Then does someone need to do an Amiga port of Oh Mummy? Do they need to do it in the same way as Manic Miner and make it terrible?
Yeah, make it really horrible. And no, I would be happy to see an original ish port. If you took something like the Amstrad version that got backported to the Spectrum recently and put that on the Amiga, I think that would be good. But then even the Genesis or Mega Drive version would probably work fine on the Amiga. So put that on there.
Was it based on an arcade game originally, a style of arcade game or a genre?
It's loosely based around Amidar. It's the same thing where you've got to paint. But if you read the interview with the developers, they say it absolutely wasn't based on that. As a side note, one of those is signed by Darren White because I used to work with him when I worked at name drop. I worked at EA with him back in 2007 to 2012. He was in the mobile division, so it wasn't that fun. And I found out he did Oh Mummy, so I took my copy and said, "Can you sign this?" And he thought I was taking the mickey.
No,
no, really,
you kind of were.
I wasn't. I kind of like it, to be honest with you.
For people who don't know, Oh Mummy is a game that I know from the Amstrad CPC, and Neil would have got as a pack-in with his. Yep. It's a really simple game where you run about a square and your footsteps will unlock boxes, and in those boxes there'll be a key, an enemy, or treasure, and you have to unlock enough of the keys to access the next level. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So you can.
And then on the next level, there's an extra mummy, and it gets more difficult, and there's a tune that plays all the way through it. It's a fairly decent rendition of a tune that will grate on you after about maybe 20 seconds. Not quite as bad as Bridget. But yeah. And it's a simple game that's actually done fairly well, but it really is simple. It's maybe even beneath the CPC at release.
It has nothing whatsoever to do with Outrun, but
yeah.
We will continue to follow progress and to support this project. And perhaps when it's concluded, maybe the team could be persuaded to try for an Amiga 500 version, maybe cut it down. In the meantime, I would say, remember, there is Faster, that's FASTER, which was that brilliant Atari ST racing game that came out recently, or STE racing game, because it uses the blitter. So that could scratch your itch. And also, it kind of shows what's possible on the hardware. So in this case, the ST has given Amiga fans, Amiga 500 fans, hope for what might be possible. There was talk of porting that to the 500. Have we heard any more about that?
I've not heard anything. I know that Jonathan won't do the port himself, but he's open. Right. He's very open to someone porting it to the Amiga if they can make the hardware do it justice.
Because he open sourced it all, didn't he?
Yeah.
So it's right there if anyone wants to do it.
Yeah, and for people who aren't too aware of the Atari ST and the Amiga specs, the Atari STE pretty much brought the ST in line with the Amiga 500. So it gave it hardware scrolling, which was missing, and a few other things like DMA sound, which brought it up in line with it. So if Faster on the STE, and in fact the version of Outrun of the STE can look really good, then the base Amiga OCS could do it as well.
Fantastic. Well, go and check out the video. The link to it is in the show notes, as is everything else we discussed today. And of course, if you think of any news, if you've come across another Outrun project or a new version of Oh Mummy that you want to share with us, head to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. And don't forget, there's also the Discord server where you can chat with us all at discord.gg/RMC Retro.
It's housekeeping.
Quiet week this week, but I want to remind everyone that Amigathon is today, 1 p.m. GMT, I believe. Google it for links. It's honestly great fun. I do love Amigathon. Tune in, just watch in the background, no pressure to do anything. You might even see This Week in Retro banners pop up as we've given a sponsorship to the event. We did a little update for Twirlers on Patreon, so if you've missed that in the pages of notifications that we all get these days, head over there to watch or listen to it. Just a wrap of what we did in 2024 and what we think we're going to do in 2025. If you want to join the Twirlers, then go to www. Don't need the www, Dave. I'll never stop saying that.
A self-addressed envelope.
Send your postal order to patreon.com/thisweekinretro. A bit of a discussion on the whole Atari shock. Now, that name seems to be a hit, so I'll be using that from now on. Happy Coding pointed out, with some data to back it up, that American consoles were making headway in the UK, and the Atari shock seems to have stopped that in its tracks. Now, it's difficult to say what would have been, and it happens to coincide when pretty much exactly when the Spectrum came to market and the computer literacy program took hold, telling parents to get their kids a computer, not a console, for Christmas. So we don't know what would have happened. Personally, I feel as if they were fading away.
Yeah, we also had the super low cost of entry for computing at the same time with the Spectrum, but also the ZX80 and 81 before it. That was sort of setting the trend. So while I get what's being said there, sure, we would have had more Atari in other parts of the world if Atari shock hadn't happened. But it didn't cause a crash in the UK. If anything, the vacuum of slowed down console development, encouraged the uptake of micros in the UK. And of course, we're in danger of doing exactly what we spoke about last week if we go too far down this rabbit hole, which is diluting the topic down to one or two countries' opinions while concentrating. Actually, yes, concentrating, not diluting. While not hearing what was going on in other parts of the world. So once again, we do encourage you all to share your own regional experiences of computer and console ownership over on our subreddit.
Yeah, and someone did point out that it's out there if you want to look at what was happening in India or in China or whatever. The history is out there. I just hope it makes it to the mainstream in the future. On to Briefs now, and some sad news for the third episode in a row with some sad news in this segment. The Retro Computer Museum, that's the one in Leicester, has been hit by supposedly devastating flood damage. The RCM, not RMC, RCM that is. RCM is in Leicester, and it's been temporarily closed because of it. Some systems are affected. They're flooring too. They say 4 inches of water in one building and 10 inches in another. I hope they have their insurance in order, but insurance can't do everything, particularly for this stuff that's irreplaceable. So thank you for letting us know, Starcade 2084.
There is just a story yesterday on the BBC News site. I'll send an article to Duncan to include, where Andy Spencer, the boss of the museum there, talks about it and is raising awareness to garner support for the cleanup operation. So good luck to him, and of course the many volunteers there who are helping him out.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, one of the things that I think might come out of this is a lot of these old equipment are built like tanks. Like you've seen people do restoration videos of stuff that have been in sheds. So I think for the most part, when it's dried out, a lot of it can probably be bought back, like the virtual reality machines. Like I'm sure they will be repairable.
It's wood and paper that can't handle it, and I'm told the arcade machines, the bottom of those got wet, and those arcade cabinets just, they don't take well to water at all. Most of them have a little bit of a riser at the bottom, meaning a little bit of water's okay. But if it gets beyond that, the chipboard just drinks it right up. As Neil, you had a video that showed that when the arcade machines were just collapsing.
They just
horrible.
swell up, and it's
mashed potato.
I mean, at least we live in a time where this hobby's quite big, and there are a lot of people that offer repair parts and services. It should a lot more. Yeah, it is.
Sad
it is heartbreaking.
Our next story comes from someone called Pajako6502. This is the year of as you mentioned, the 30th anniversary of Command & Conquer. You've included a link to an article in Metro where there is a desire for the series to return. And, will RTS come back into fashion this year?
Top selling for Christmas in Spain apparently was the Spectrum.
The Spectrum.
The Spectrum. It outsold the PlayStation 5 Pro and the Xbox in the run-up to Christmas. I don't think we should look too much into the detail there in case we find out it was just one little window and all the pre-orders were in the same bit. But let's just be happy to see that it means no matter what the window is and what the caveats are, it means it's been a success, which is good because it means lots of people are having fun. Jet
Set Bloody Willy.
And I was going to say they had a nicer box in Spain as well. It had some lovely sort of old computer game box art around the sleeve. So we got the kind of boring replica of the original 80s box, and Spain got this lovely, colourful kind of art box. So yeah, maybe that helped.
Do you like visiting art galleries, Paul?
It depends. I have visited an art gallery, but I wouldn't do it out of normal choice. So
yes or no? Yes or no?
No, to be honest with you.
Do you like drinking wine, Paul?
I love drinking wine, yeah.
Do you like eating cheese, Paul?
I love eating cheese.
Well, then you'd love this new version of Doom in which you can walk around a gallery while drinking wine and eating cheese. It's called Doom, the Gallery Experience. It contains all of the greatest works of art from art history for you to consider. And I do like the way Doom Guy, when you do zoom in on a piece of art, he does a very satisfying noise as he drinks his wine, and the cheese percentage bar or counter goes up as you nibble on cheese. So do check out Doom, the Gallery Experience.
That's how you teach kids in school to make art fun for them. You know? Yeah, play Doom and go around an art gallery.
Here's your wine.
Yeah, here's your wine.
Maybe swap that for Ribena, yeah.
Active Barracuda gives us a BBC archive clip on Newsnight discussing the launch of the Nintendo Wii back in 2006. Now, does that make it retro?
Wow. I think the Wii, despite being one of the greatest selling consoles of all times, is going to become one of the rarest because every single one I come across still has the batteries in the controllers, and it's just a leaky, horrible mess. They're all just being destroyed by people leaving their batteries in them. COSAM's Neptune project has now been publicly released, thanks to Chrissy Baps for letting us know. You can build your own Neptune, which of course was Sega's cancelled console, which incorporated the 32X and the Mega Drive. It didn't have the Sega CD in there originally, did it? It was just the 32X and the Mega Drive combined as a console, which was cancelled as the Sega Saturn came closer, and it just didn't make much sense. However, there is the combination of this beautiful case, which they've recreated for the Neptune, and the hardware. So if you want to make yourself one and create a piece of history that never existed, then check out Kosam's Neptune project.
But unlike other things, cancelled consoles, this one kind of did exist because you could have the same hardware and do the same stuff. So this gives you something that you can play games on.
Yeah, there is something to play on it, which is nice.
Loads and loads and loads more in the subreddit. Too much to cover here. If you fancy yourself having a little break from work, maybe you want to go and have a crafty break, then have a look at reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. And if you want to, you can put a www in front of that. Mister is my favourite way to play arcade and console games. I don't think I want to try and put too much detail into words exactly how it works. So I think it's very difficult to do that. However, I will say it uses field programmable gate arrays, FPGA, to try and replicate how things work at a hardware level for theoretically the best emulation we're able to get. But where I can be entirely confident about Mister is saying that it's fantastic to use. The UI is great, and playing the games in it feels better than any other way. When Neil did a video on Mister over 5 years ago, I bought one the very same day, and I have no regrets. Eventually upgraded from the Mister Stack, which is a tentacled monster, to the Mister Multisystem, a consoleized version, which is much nicer to look at and to use because the cables are routed properly. It's been made with some sense. In some ways, the Mister project has been kind of quiet all these years in terms of hardware because it's still fundamentally the same hardware, all based around a development board called a DE10 Nano. So the Mister project is fundamentally an I/O breakout board for that in most ways. All of the Mister versions you can buy are the same thing at their heart, and it's only the additional I/O that's been added, as well, of course, the form factor. Now, I've got a slice in the bottom of mine that allows me to connect almost any 9-pin joystick or mouse, for example. I know that Heber have been hinting at the next incarnation, and I've no doubt that it'll be like their first. It'll be a premium implementation rather than a budget one that gives you what you want it to be. The key difference Richard has pointed out so far, that there's no reliance on the DE10 Nano board. It's all integrated on the PCB.
Yeah, well, they haven't hinted. They've announced it, haven't they?
They have announced it. Okay.
Yeah, they announced it on social media, didn't they? They showed the board rather than just.
I think they showed the board, and then Richard came and said, "Look, here it is confirmed that what you can see, that footprint there is for the FPGA." Yeah.
Field programmable gate array. For some reason, it just makes me think of One Man and His Dog.
Come by.
Tiny sheepdog in there, just adjusting the gates.
Paul, I know you're married. I know you've got a missus. Have you got a Mister?
I have got a Mister. Yes, I was. I have the delay of the Spectrum Next 2 Kickstarter round to thank for it, because I backed that thinking that'll do. It was delayed, and I thought, well, I want something, so I bought a Mister, and yeah, again, no regrets. Absolutely brilliant machine. Like, I would say almost all of my retro gaming happens on that now. Yeah.
I know that the Amigos guys, they weren't too sold on it initially.
Yeah.
And now they've got them, they won't turn away from them. It's just ideal. I don't know why it feels better than just software emulation, but it does. And it might be psychosomatic. It might all be in my head, but it does.
Without even getting into the difference between software and FPGA emulation, just the very experience of you turn it on, bang, it's up, you choose your game, you're in it. There's just so few distractions.
Yes.
I like it.
Yeah.
The main reason we're talking about Mister today, though, is thanks to Namtab Mai. A new Mister implementation is coming thanks to Takiudon.
Just read that name again backwards, Dave.
Batman. No. I am Batman.
There you go. Yeah, he's got you good there.
I even put in my notes how to pronounce it phonetically. Nam Tab Mai. No, I am Batman. Thank you to, and I'm gonna get my revenge. Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne, that's Bruce Wayne. The Joker, if you're listening, that's Bruce Wayne. Thanks to I Am Batman, a new Mr. implementation is coming from Taki Udon. Taki has been rather famous in the last 6 months or so. He's recreated the DE10 Nano board. That's the development kit, the expensive part that's the heart of every Mr. to make his own clone, which he went on to sell for at a far lower price than the DE10 Nano board. For years, I'd been saying that the DE10 Nano board was too expensive. Why is it not coming down in price like all the other hardware does? And people said, oh, it's different. But no, I was right. It could have been done cheaper, and he made it cheaper. And what he's done next, well, what he's done with that is called the Mr. Pi. Now, we've been keeping you up to date with the Mr. Pi because it's so important, and so is Mr., we think. But Mr. Pi was a huge drop in cost and represented a way to get the cost of Mr. From the realms of, yeah, I'd like that one day, to, well, that's so cheap that you can go ahead and do it without thinking too much about it. What it lacked, though, was a consoleized form factor. It also lacked a good name because Mr. Pi is a terrible name. The alternative to a Mr. is to have a Pi in a console, which is not a bad option. It's more versatile. But why calling it a Mr. Pi? I don't know. So Mr. Pi is a terrible idea. He ignored all the feedback. He called it a Mr. Pi anyway. But it's aggressively priced. It's really cheap. And that's why it's a success. So next up is today's story. He's done a consoleized Mr., which I think is supposed to resemble a PlayStation, but it absolutely doesn't. It looks like a cheap TV box.
Well, it's the PS1, isn't it? The original cost-reduced PlayStation. That's what it's based on. Yeah.
Does it look like that?
Yeah, that was a bit.
I think so. It's good. It takes its design cues from it, I think.
Design cues. Okay. It looks like a cheap TV box. And I guess that's appropriate because Taki's method is to bring down the cost of this stuff to the point where it is incredibly low cost. And as far as the Mr. side of it, we should assume full Mr. compatibility. He says it does, and there's no reason to doubt that. If it can run the PS1 core, then I can't see it being a cut-down FPGA. It must be sufficient to run everything else that the Mr. does. It does have analog output. He's not cut analog output out. I thought that might be one of the corners he might cut. He's also added NFC, Wi-Fi, and BT, so Bluetooth. So he must have found some cheap chip to implement there. And that's what I want from Mr. The device is very small, so I'm not sure what outputs it would have. Logic would dictate it'll have an HDMI, a VGA, and a 3.5mm audio jack in the back, but I don't know that for a fact. It only has 4 USB ports, which is really tight. So you lose one to keyboard and one to mouse right away, and that only leaves you 2 with controllers. For my Mr., I have several controllers plugged in at once. So I wouldn't be enough for me. It also has PlayStation stuff added. So that's the theme of this. So it has 2 snack ports for PlayStation controllers, and I don't think that's a good idea at all. I'm very much against that. And it has a PS1 memory card, and that's fine. The PS1 memory card doesn't cause any problems. But the issue I have with the snack for the PlayStation is, while it might sound a great idea being able to connect original PlayStation controllers directly to the core you're running, it isn't very versatile, and it relies on other cores having specific implementation of snack within the core to get that to work. Otherwise, you don't have a controller that works. You need to put another controller in. If he had instead made a way to get the PlayStation controller to connect through USB, he could present it to every core that's in there.
These are confirmed as snack ports, aren't they? They're not some kind of PlayStation to USB adaptability.
No, it's snack. Okay. It's snack. So snack is ideal for light guns and for other special controllers because it gives you a direct link to the core. But if you go with a USB implementation, you add 0.1 or 1 millisecond, whatever it is, latency, which is literally nothing. And you get the versatility to use it in arcade cores, in any core you want, in computer cores, without the core having to specifically implement code for it. So I think that's a little bit of a misstep, but it's not a big deal. The price, though, for founders, which is the first people that sign up to buy it, and you can sign up to the mailing list to buy it for, that price is $150, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous low. It's incredible to get something that's as neat and tidy as that in people's hands for that price. the two little nitpicks I had with it, the USB ports and the snack, are really minor, and it's definitely not enough to say stay away from that. For that price, incredible. What do you think, Neil?
Well, it seems like the floodgates have opened for FPGA now because during lockdown, we had the availability issues with the supply chain with the chips and things like that. And as things have got back on stream and become available, we're starting to see projects which we always hoped to see and thought would come, but they were delayed by that situation. Now, Taki's doing a great job of, I think, maintaining the momentum of interest that he raised with his DE10 replacement. It did a lot of good work on social media to raise awareness and rally the community behind him, and now behind different form factors of hardware for the Mister project. I remember going back to when I first covered Heber's multi-system a couple of years back, which was designed to bring that more traditional console form factor for to users. I should point out as well that the Taki's Mr. Pi is compatible with the original Heber multi-system, so you can drop it in there right now to get that console form factor. When I covered Heber's multi-system originally, it was met with a lot of positivity. It was also met with some quite nasty messages and comments from people who vehemently wanted to defend the stack, which always tickled me because projects like the multi-system and Taki's consoles, they were never trying to replace the stack. They're simply alternatives, and choice is always a good thing. So I was always a bit confused by that resistance to a console form factor. The problem with offering choice, though, choice is great, but the problem is if you split away from your choice being fully Mister compatible, then you need developers and cores to support that split. For example, if you move to a more powerful but incompatible FPGA chip, they would then need to remake their cores to support it. So these projects have to walk a fine line between compatibility and potentially introducing new features. Dave?
Yeah, and just for clarity, Taki stuff and Heber stuff and the Mister stack are all fully compatible. There's no forking there.
No, there's nothing. You can take the SD card out of a Mister stack and you can put it in a multi-system and it will work. Now, Taki's shown a render for his new case, which is based on that PS1 style, like a smooth pebble, which I quite like. Dave's on the fence about it, but I quite like it.
I don't dislike it. It doesn't scream PlayStation to me. You don't look at it and say PlayStation. You just think it's a cheap TV box.
And I think the full details of the board, are they still coming out, or have they been fully shared now? I don't
think the full details are out. I was looking to find out what the ports are on the back, but I couldn't find that. Maybe he's answered questions buried down in social media. It's deep there because he's quite forthcoming. He doesn't keep secrets.
Yeah. Paul?
Yeah, I seem to recall reading that there are like composite video out and things like that. So obviously to support light guns and things. So if you want the PlayStation light gun, it uses the joystick port and it's got like a little yellow.
There's a composite pass through to get the sync, isn't there? Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that project. Heber announced the Multi-System 2 in November, December last year. They've shown the completed board is doing very well in testing. Theirs is, as I said, fully Mister compatible. It's a 10-layer board, which is no insignificant thing that they've come up with. And I've been told recently that it's got some really interesting features that it's bringing to the party. So hurry up, Heber. And share the details, please. Share the details of your Multi-System 2 console, because we can all get excited about both of these projects, all the new ways we can enjoy Mister, and not potentially, because I've been told things and I want other people to be told them too, some of the things that the Multi-System 2 is bringing to the party. And on that topic, I would say, and Dave, you were raving about the cost of Taki's console, which is great.
I do want to dial back on that a little bit.
I just want to say, don't make it the only factor, because I'm saying this, I don't know what the Multi-System 2 is going to cost, but I would say it's dangerous to make cost a sort of a race to be the cheapest, because you've got to allow room for advances and for experiment and for improvements. And you've got to give a bit of wriggle room for companies to kind of develop and
wriggle.
You know, if it's all about price, it kind of becomes a race to the bottom in quality, and that is no comment whatsoever on the quality of Taki's work. I'm just saying, if you make it a race to cost, that's kind of the conclusion of where this all goes. So let's just remember that as well, I think. Yeah, Paul, you're jumping up and down.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think the kind of next big round of minis will be probably FPGA based as well. Now that,
Do you think so?
yeah, I think how are they going to sell you, another mini that's just an ARM chip? Now they can say, well, you can buy this, mini GX4000 and it's got, as next to real hardware as you can possibly have. And with the cost, I know we just said don't judge it on cost, but with the cost of FPGA solutions coming down, because they're becoming more prevalent, I think, by the end of this decade, you'll see, commercial grade minis that are FPGA based.
I did see some news pass me by on a feed the other day of somebody, I can't remember the name of it now, I'm sure it will come up in the following weeks. A very, very low cost FPGA project, very small, with just enough power to run an Amiga.
I saw that as well.
Yeah, it wasn't one of these official mini projects that are going around, but it was just, people are now really starting to think about, well, what do people actually want to do with their FPGA?
Yes.
Do they really want a Dreamcast or a chip that's potentially can run the Dreamcast when the core is made for £800? Or do they want to spend 50 quid on something that's very well made, but they know the limitations of it, and those limitations are fine for them?
There's an enormous amount of stuff that will run on a limited FPGA, loads of arcade stuff, 8-bit computers and so on. I did want to dial back a little bit on the price, because if you get a Mister and you use it 3 or 4 days a week for 10 years, then saving a couple of £100 on it to get the absolute cheapest one might not be the best idea. Getting one that does absolutely everything you want could be a good idea. But ultimately, $150, it's a no-brainer. It's such a good deal for what Mister does. It's absolutely incredible. I presume, though, this won't be the only way he consoleizes Mister. I'm sure it'll be a success, but I don't have any real attraction to the PlayStation, and I certainly wouldn't want snack PlayStation controllers. Happy to use them for USB because they seem to be a good controller. But I imagine he will do something else that's maybe a generic one of this, like this. Maybe DE10, D9 ports, or is it DB9? Neil, which is the right one?
D9, if you're talking about 9-pin, Atari.
Maybe Sega or Nintendo ports or something modular, or better yet, just more USB so you can use it however you like. So I'm sure this won't be the only way he does it. And if he can do it at that price, he will sell thousands.
You would think the snack ports would add cost to the build, so you could make it. If cost is,
are they not just connected to the I/O pins of the DE10?
You still pay for a port when you're trying to get that.
The port itself, yeah. I don't think there's any extra logic needed.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we can all say and agree. Well, before I say that, Paul's jumping up and down to tell us something, so he might be about to disagree in a massive way. Come on, put the cat amongst the pigeons. Come on, Paul.
This is the internet, and I'm going to shout out. Taki's original, just the board on its own, if you buy the DE10 Nano clone, that's like $100, I think, or £100. So, and if you chuck just buying components retail, you chuck a snack adapter on that, they're what, £30 if I get one from Heber or whatever. So, and he's getting this at manufacturing cost, so $150 doesn't seem that unreasonable to cram that all into one board.
I don't even know if he's making money at $150. Maybe his plan is to sell a few hundred at $150 to the point everybody says, yeah, you want one of these, and then say, well, the real cost $230. Even at that, it would be a steal.
Yeah.
Anyway,
exciting times for Mister, I think is a fair conclusion.
Yeah. Mister for the masses, as we've said before,
not the classes.
Yes.
Time now for our community question of the week. And last week's question was, after seeing the Tomorrow's World segment on what will be happening to technology in 30 years' time, 30 years ago, we asked, what is your prediction for a new bit of technology in 30 years' time? Go wild. What do you want to see? What will it do? Will it make our lives easier? Will we be taxed to use it? So let's check out the question, the answers. Dave, are we out of competition mode?
We're out of contest mode. Contest it is.
Mode. Okay. So our top answer is from Antiques for Geeks. It says 2055, so 30 years' time, the year of the Linux desktop.
Colony Activist says the nostalgia for older systems will likely grow and enthusiasts might go to greater and greater lengths to preserve and restore vintage hardware and software, making retro computing a cherished hobby. I'll shut up now.
Yeah, but nostalgia will go greater and greater, and then we'll die off. So that will go lower. But then it will be the next generation of nostalgia. But then you're coming into the realms of online-only systems. Who knows where that's going to go? People
nostalgia for the 13th revision of FIFA.
Yeah, we need a time machine. That's the answer. Yeah. Lord Borak says the release of FIFA 55. I don't think it's called FIFA anymore, is it?
No, they've dropped it. They've stopped paying for the license for that.
EAFC or something like that, isn't it?
Colony Activist has a go at Duncan and says Reddit timers for automatic posting will still not work.
Oh.
The question of the week did not appear on time.
Paul, have you looked through the answers? Do any jump out for you? Excluding your own.
There was one actually I posted and then realised someone else had posted, so I deleted mine and changed it. But someone said augmented reality contact lenses, which maybe not contacts, but I certainly think specs like something like this you can pop on and walk around and everything will be there. So.
Or just direct into your brain, so you just see it somehow in an augmented way.
Yeah, that would be.
I will read out Paul's answer. Paul said, "I reckon something like the robot bodies from."
Do his accent if you can read out his answer.
I reckon something like the robot bodies from the comic/movie surrogates will be a possibility. Maybe not on fleshy replicas in 30 years, but definitely robot bodies of a sort. You'll be able to strap in remotely and go about your business. But they'll be able to learn from you, and eventually the robot body's AI will carry on working while you're sleeping, and you'll get a full status report of when you crafty log on in the morning.
Fiskett has said a robot Dave, and he's drawn a picture of a robot Dave.
Oh, has he? Let me have a look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's uncanny.
This week in retro.
The red eyes are a bit scary.
Toxic Seahorse is risking being banned by saying an AI to remove references of Ultima from the podcast. Oh. We could be Ultima free by episode 1761.
Well, we haven't mentioned it, so it's entirely your fault, Toxic Seahorse, that Ultima has been mentioned in this episode. Otherwise, it wouldn't
Ultima! Paul, do you have any Ultima?
No, I'm not really a big RPG type person. So mind you, that said, I've got the Zork trilogy books and things up there, the things. So, yeah, kind of.
Right. Well, that takes us on to our new question of the week. Thank you to everyone who participated this week. The question of the week this week is, what game do you want to see reported? What deserves to be ported to your favorite system by a team who can do a better job? And we will allow answers where the game perhaps hasn't even been ported in the first place. So if it missed out first time around.
I would like to hear, though, games that were ported poorly. What deserves a second shot?
Yeah, I think so. Let us know. Head over to reddit.com/r/this week in retro. As always, if you'd like to become an official twirler and support the show, head to patreon.com/this week in retro. Any other links, Dave? PCBWay.com. Thank you for supporting us.
Just a reminder to go and watch Amigathon if you'd like to be entertained. And otherwise, keep an eye out for Pajako, because while he isn't promoting his own stuff, he'll appear absolutely everywhere. He's ubiquitous.
If you're an expo, he'll be there.
Yeah.
If you're watching a podcast, he'll be there.
Yeah.
He's everywhere. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Hope to see you at the cave soon.
Thank you. I'm really you have no idea how this has made my week. Said to my wife, the wedding day, birth of my son, they're gone. This is the best day. You know.
Thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Give us a wave, Paul. He's waving. See you next time, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.